Have you ever stopped to think about how unity, or, well, the lack of it, really affects how well a message lands, or how effective a project is?
It's a huge factor, isn't it?
Definitely. And today, we're diving into that. We've got some fascinating notes here from a training session that actually uses biblical principles to look at the power of partnership.
That's right. These notes are aimed at developing plans for reaching specific groups, but the insights they pull from the Bible, particularly Joshua and parts of the New Testament, are really about the fundamentals of unity and working together.
Exactly. So think less dry strategy, more um, timeless wisdom from these ancient texts about shared goals and, frankly, humility. We're hoping you get some real aha moments from this.
Okay, so where do we start? The notes kick off with this concept of an end vision.
An end vision, right? Like the ultimate goal.
Precisely. They use the example of God's promise to Moses, Joshua, and the Israelites about the promised land. This vision of a new home, a good land, after overcoming challenges, living according to their values, that whole narrative in the book of Joshua.
And the notes point out that this whole story, the process of settling that land, is just full of lessons about strategy and how different roles were needed to, well, make it happen.
Yeah. And a key principle the source really hammers home is the need to believe in that goal. Like, really believe it's achievable and intended. For Israel, it was the conviction that God wanted them to possess that entire land.
So it wasn't just a vague hope.
No, it was a deep-seated belief. The notes suggest this applies broadly, whatever you're aiming for, that strong belief in the what is foundational. They reference Joshua chapter 1, where God basically tells Joshua, get going, this land I promised, it's yours for the taking.
Okay, so that shared, unwavering belief in the end goal is step one for any real partnership. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So from that internal belief, where do the notes go next? How does it look from the outside?
Right, it shifts focus to how partnerships are perceived externally. The source moves into the New Testament, specifically the Gospel of John, and it brings up this really powerful idea. When people see a group unified, working together, it actually makes their message more believable. John 13 and 17 are the key spots mentioned.
And Jesus' words there are pretty direct, aren't they? Saying the world would know his followers by their love for one another, by their unity.
Exactly. And this leads to a really provocative question in the notes. It asks, do people reject a message just because they don't buy the message itself? Or is it sometimes because the messengers, well, they look divided, they aren't showing that love and unity?
Wow. That's a tough question. Puts the responsibility back on the group.
It really does. The source argues that, look, having the right information, the correct doctrine, and sharing it effectively, that's all important. But Jesus himself seemed to highlight love and unity as the main things that would convince the world.
So it's less about just saying the right words and more about living it out and how you relate to each other.
That's the core idea. The relationships within the group are part of the message itself, you could say.
Okay, powerful stuff. So we've got the end vision, the external impact of unity. What about the internal aspect? How do partnerships affect the people already in the group?
Good question. That's where the notes turn to the book of Ephesians. The idea here is that how believers partner together actually confirms whether they're living up to their calling, walking worthy, as the text puts it.
Oh, walking worthy, okay.
Ephesians chapter 4 is the main reference point. Paul's message there, as the notes interpret it, is really for the community itself. He's urging them to actively maintain unity, grounded in peace.
So if there's division, if that unity isn't there,
then it signals they're falling short of that calling. The source suggests that division is basically a sign of not living in a way that matches what they profess.
and do the notes dig into why that division happens?
They do. They link it to this idea of failing to put off the old self and put on the new self.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase a little. Put off the old, put on the new. What does that look like practically in this context?
Well, think of it as consciously letting go of negative ingrained patterns. The notes list things like dishonesty, lingering anger, taking what's not yours, bitterness, gossip, tearing others down.
Sort of the destructive stuff.
Exactly. And actively replacing those with behaviors that align with their core values and calling. The source argues that when those old self behaviors persist within the group, making them look just like the world they're trying to reach, it shows they've forgotten the call isn't just about the mission out there, but about transformation in here.
Right. It's about embodying the message, not just delivering it.
Okay.
So The next one in the notes brings us to 1 Corinthians, talking about partnerships, helping maintain focus.
Yeah, keeping the focus on the main thing, the core message in the source's context. It's the cross, the gospel.
And the example is the church in Corinth.
Precisely.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians chapter 1 describes these divisions bubbling up, and what were they dividing over?
Wasn't it about who baptized them? Like, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos.
Exactly. Not huge theological splits, but allegiances based on personalities, on leaders. And the source highlights Paul's almost sarcastic questions. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in Peter's name?
It really cuts through the noise, doesn't it?
It does. And the notes are careful to say this isn't an argument against denominations or different groups existing.
Okay, that's an important clarification.
Right. It's a critique of letting those secondary differences or even just personality conflicts fracture the unity and distract from the central message.
So getting too caught up in your specific team jersey, so to speak, can make you lose sight of the actual game.
That's a good way to put it. When the focus shifts too much to our specific organization, our denomination, our agency, it can pull focus from our identity in Christ and the core task, keeping the main thing the main thing.
There's that really blunt line in the notes you mentioned earlier.
Yes. The organization is not your God or your mother.
Yeah, that's direct. It really forces a check on where ultimate loyalty lies. Have we made the structure more important than the purpose?
It's a question worth asking, definitely. Okay, so that leads to the final principle the source covers, which kind of underpins all of this.
Which is?
Humility, drawing from Philippians chapter 2.
Humility. Okay, seems crucial for any kind of teamwork. How did the notes frame it?
They set up a clear contrast. Pride divides, humility builds unity. The argument is straightforward. A lack of partnership often comes down to self-centeredness.
Like wanting to build my thing, get my credit.
Exactly. Establishing your own work, wanting the glory, being more focused on your own little kingdom than the bigger picture. The source insists that real, authentic partnership starts and continues with humility.
It's about checking the ego.
Fundamentally, and it poses that critical self-reflection question. Are we genuinely trying to expand God's kingdom, or are we actually more invested in building our own little earthly one? Using Christ, of course, as the ultimate example of putting others first.
Really powerful insights drawn from these texts. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've touched on quite a bit.
We have the need for that clear, shared vision, like the promised land idea.
Right, and how unity is this powerful, visible proof of the message's authenticity to outsiders.
Then how that internal unity shows we're actually living out our calling, walking worthy.
And the danger of getting sidetracked by secondary issues, losing focus on the main thing, keeping the organization in its proper place.
And finally, the absolute necessity of humility as the foundation for it all. Without it, genuine partnership just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And what strikes me is how, even though these insights come from specific biblical contexts, the principles themselves, they feel universal.
Absolutely. Shared vision, unity, focus, humility. These are vital for any collaboration, aren't they? Whether it's family, work projects, community groups, anywhere people need to work together.
Definitely valuable takeaways for anyone listening, regardless of their background. So maybe a final thought for you to chew on from this deep dive.
Go for it.
As you look at your own life, your own projects, your own teams, where could bring in a bit more unity, a more intentional focus on shared goals, and maybe, just maybe, a little more humility? Where could that unlock something new? How could it strengthen the impact of whatever it is you're trying to do?